gonna agree to stand here.
Okay. Well, we have to.
You changed exercise.
Yeah.
Or do you have to go? Or pack up?
No, I mean
Tell me.
soonish. I mean, but not like any second or anything.
All right. What are rules I should know?
Well, the first rule would be we need someone to participate with you. Otherwise, it's just you and
With
me
me?
talking.
I like that.
Well,
We're people, right?
Well, we are, but
I have a lot of opinions. I have more than one person's opinion, so I think there's at least 3 people in front of you. Okay?
Yeah.
So what's the next rule?
Well, as soon as we get someone to join, you want to join?
Don't join.
Yeah, well, why not?
Okay, join. Come on.
Okay. Well, great, Sam. You're.
I'm
Thank you
unsure.
very much. You're unsure. So you're gonna start an unsure. What's your name again?
Hunter.
Hunter.
We've
What's
met before.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Was that a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Water jug, sunglasses, yeah.
Right. Yes. Water
I
jug,
was standing on the
sunglasses.
side, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I came last minute last time, so.
Yeah, that's all right. So today's statement is abortion is health care. And the exercise, Hunter and Sam, right?
Go with your feeling. Go with what you felt.
Well, go with what you
felt.
Technically.
Don't pay attention to me. Go with what you felt.
Yes,
what it's about.
that is true. Definitely don't
it's about
let
truth, right? Real.
Yes, that is right. Don't let each
Absolutely.
other influence where you go.
Right.
And
I'm gonna
technically,
stand over
not
here. I know
that
where I am.
that Sam is what he means, but what you think and believe about the answer, regardless of anyone else. So I'll count you down, Sam, if you want to. Well, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Just for the sake of the exercise, it's
Let's do it. Yeah.
abortion is healthcare. You know where you're going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, move. He's unsure.
Yeah.
That's fine. You can say it. No one is actually. Well, do whatever you believe,
start here.
whatever you think.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're not sure about it,
Okay.
I have a feeling you're going to give me arguments for one way or the other.
Yeah, you should. You should argue. That's all we have.
No,
to
that's-
convince people.
Well, that is hopefully what we have.
Other than violence, we have words.
I
So-
do agree. So, Hunter,
Yep.
actually, Sam, we'll start with you.
Okay.
You're unsure.
Yeah.
Are you actually unsure?
Well, here's where I'm coming from. One,
Okay.
I'd like to say again,
Abortion
my
is
opinion
healthcare.
on this doesn't really matter because I'll never understand this issue in a way women will, right? Okay, or people who can get pregnant, I should say.
Do you mean you won't be able to experience
I will never
the
get pregnant. I will
physical?
never have a miscarriage. I will
Yep.
never have to deal with the choice of getting pregnant. I will never have to deal with worrying about somebody impregnating me and then me having an abortion versus
Yep.
having a child. And now this is on me, a young person, that. So this, I would say, I'm unsure because I would prefer abortion can be healthcare or is a part of healthcare. But yes, we're going to work with this one, right? That's
Yep.
the rules.
Abortion
I can't
is
change
healthcare.
it.
We'll leave it the way it is
So
right
I've
now.
said all that. Then I am going to move a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to move to strongly agree.
Okay.
Okay. Now, in this statement, I'm going to accept it.
Okay.
I agree.
Accept it.
Strongly.
You strongly agree. Why
Yes.
do you strongly agree? What's the
Because it's
reason?
true.
Okay. Why do you believe it's true?
Okay. I can't prove something to be true. I can only disprove. So I will say that trauma, let's say you're a woman, you get pregnant, it's not your choice, and it doesn't actually fertilize for maybe a day or so. I'd have to look it up. And you could take a pill that prevents conception from occurring, right? That's illegal now, I think. And so that leads to this, right? Preventing somebody from not getting pregnant forces them to make this terrible choice that we look at as an academic exercise of epistemology. I'm learning it, right? Yeah. So that's my feelings. Yeah.
So, so you believe abortion is health care because you strongly agree because I'm trying to understand your
Yes.
main reason there
Yes,
is.
sorry, I do ramble.
Just forgive me, but just summarize your main reason.
Yeah.
I'm
I
struggling.
need to remember. Abortion is healthcare. I think it's a tool in a toolkit. I don't think abortion is the first choice for anyone. I think it's a decision you come to. But yes, it's a tool in the toolkit. So it is healthcare. It's part of healthcare. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd have to have somebody say something against that statement because I can say it, but is it true? Do you? Is this what he's here for?
Could be next. Yeah.
Okay.
In a moment. Yep.
Do you have a thought on what I?
Well,
just
hold
said?
on.
Sorry.
You said it shouldn't be the first choice. I'll just for a moment
I
here,
didn't say
and then we'll go
shouldn't,
back
I
and
said
forth.
It usually is not.
Usually is not. Oh, I thought you said shouldn't.
It probably
you-
shouldn't. I don't know. I don't care. It's not my choice. I'm not going to moralize someone else's decision. They do it
Would-
for any reason they want.
I won't. I'll wait to push in for another moment, except for asking, would you say, let's say, a nursing mother of a week-old infant, would you say it should be her choice to smother that baby with a pillow, or whatever, kill the baby?
Well, let me
Is
ask
that her choice?
Is it your choice to smother another person? That baby. You smother that baby. Is it your choice? Is that your choice? Should it be?
Well, what do you think?
Well, your answer to that, because obviously you shouldn't do it, but you
Okay.
can. Donald Rumsfeld said free people are able to do what free people do, and he was excusing robbing, theft during Iraq falling apart. Free people can do what they choose, but
with the baby infant, no, with the very particular, should a woman, a woman, so she's given birth, she's actively.
No, let's talk about me. Let's say there's this baby.
Well, hold
That's
on.
me.
Well, I would like to ask you this question.
Yeah, interrogate
Should
me.
a mother be able to smother her infant child whom she is
Is that a real question
breastfeeding?
you're asking me?
It is, yeah. I'm just
That's not
wondering.
a real question in reality.
Well, it's a real question.
Do you think that's an actual intellectual question? Should somebody... it's a King Solomon question. This is what cavemen dealt with. No, you shouldn't smother a fucking kid. You're
Okay.
free to do so, and you should be punished if you smother a kid. Maybe that's what you're getting at. The fetus is a kid. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just wondering. I'm asking a
Is that what you're
question.
leading up to? Yeah, but it's a...
It's not a trick
not
question.
offensive. I'm not trying to be offensive, but I think it's a ridiculous question because... Right?
Well, yeah.
Am I wrong?
Well, you think the act is ridiculous, right?
They're not the same thing.
They're not at all.
I don't
Yeah, so I see maybe
Sure.
you're trying to go for false equivalency, but I don't know. So let's see.
Well,
Yeah.
first, I'm simply asking if you
Yeah.
think that she should be allowed to do it. It may seem like a simple answer to you, but that's
No,
okay.
I think the force of law, I think you shouldn't do that. You should
Okay.
not kill a person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hunter.
Yes.
We'll
There
come
are
back
reasons
to those
why.
things.
I mean, if a
you
baby's coming at you
only
with a knife,
agree.
murder it.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Let's let Hunter
Do you
talk.
see a baby running
Sam.
with a knife? I'll talk to her.
Okay. Hunter, why do you agree? and if I can add briefly, not strongly agree, but just first, why do you agree abortion is healthcare?
I mean, because it is healthcare. It's a healthcare procedure, whether it's, I don't know what the exact procedure is in the late first or early second trimester. I know there's a pill you can take if it's early enough. Either way, though, it is a healthcare procedure. For just asking that question, it literally is a healthcare procedure.
Okay, but if I can, just why? What about it is taking care of health, just specifically?
Well, you're providing a service to a woman who, it's provided by a physician, right? I mean, it's the core of healthcare. So if we're just going to stick with that, as to whether or not it's moral or not, that's a different conversation. But as far as like the hard definition of is it healthcare or is it not healthcare, I mean, it is, absolutely. It's affecting the woman's body. So
Would you say the similar way, for instance, perhaps, is a lobotomy healthcare because it's provided by a physician?
Well, that's a false equivalency, though.
Well, I'm not saying it's the same thing. I'm just asking, is a lobotomy healthcare because it's provided? I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just saying if part of the definition of healthcare is a physician providing it, is, let's say, immoral, if you were to believe a lobotomy is wrong, is that healthcare because it's provided by a physician?
No, because the research has shown that it's ineffective and it doesn't do anything, and it actually can make the person worse. That's not... At the time, I'm sure they thought it was healthcare, but then as the research started to come out, we realized this is not a legitimate procedure. So I wouldn't consider that healthcare, no.
So I'm simply wondering about it is an epistemological exercise, as Sam pointed out.
Right.
It's and so just asking the questions, if for you, part of the definition of healthcare is a physician providing it, obviously for you it's clearly not the only reason.
Part of the definition, yeah.
Or might be part of the definition,
Yeah.
right? Because in the case of lobotomy, you would say now if someone started performing that, I presume, anyway, I don't know this for sure about law, but it would probably be arrested. They probably would lose their license.
Right.
I don't know that for a fact. I'm pretty sure. They don't do lobotomies anymore, right?
Right.
But as you pointed out, they used to think they were healthcare. So obviously it's not necessarily part of the definition. What would you say, for instance, there's no one else on the other side, so I kind of have to do a little devil's advocate, Hunter, but what would you say to someone who says, what about the unborn's care? Are we providing health to them? Or if I may, Hunter, if I can change that for 2 seconds. So part of your reason was it's provided by a physician, though maybe not, because there's all sorts of things physicians can do that actually aren't healthcare. I mean, even today, obviously, you can lose your license for all number of things that turns out they're just making money. Physicians are human just like anybody else in terms of temptation to whatever. But what if you were to say, then what would be the reason? So abortion is healthcare. Other than that, are there other reasons for you that you would view it as providing healthcare, abortion?
Well, yeah. So the fetus, I mean, you're presuming that the fetus is, just like you and me, right? It's a life that should be protected, though. I don't think that's really true. I don't know where to draw that line. I'm not a doctor, but...
Do you have an inkling, or do you have at least a tentative opinion about where that line would be drawn?
Honestly, I don't really know where that precise line would be drawn. I'm the wrong person to give that opinion. I just don't think that there should be an outright ban like there is here in South Dakota. I think there needs to be a lot more leniency when it comes to that, especially during the first trimester. As far as where the exact line should be, though, I don't know. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm not a specialist when it comes to that. So
Sure. Well, you mentioned the first trimester. Is there something? Maybe there is a hidden reason there for you, just upon reflection. Is there something in the first trimester that's different than the second for you? Because you mentioned the first trimester being...
the first trimester is what? The first, I don't know, like 10 or 12 weeks, I think, something like that.
I have to do my math. 12 weeks, yeah, give or take.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know.
Slightly more, whatever.
Yeah, whether or not it should be the full first trimester that should be allowed, or whether there should be a cutoff somewhere in there, I don't know.
Okay.
There are plenty of women who've come out to me saying, hey, I didn't know I was pregnant until 2 or 3 weeks, into the first trimester. And now they're scrambling because their state says you can only have 4 or 5 weeks. So I don't know where that line should be drawn. I don't know where it should go.
Okay.
I know that there's a heartbeat somewhere in the first trimester.
About 6 weeks in. Yep.
Yeah.
Usually not too long after a woman knows she's pregnant, depending,
Right, but that doesn't necessarily doesn't mean that it has the same rights as a full-blown person. Still doesn't mean you can equate the two, just because it has a heartbeat.
Sure. What is basically why? Why do you think that? Or is there certain things that would happen for you that would constitute, let's say, legal protections or the right to have health care for the unborn?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm from California originally, and even they have a limit, right? They think it's a third trimester cutoff, right? Even the liberal state of California has a limit on what you can and can't do with regards to abortion because, again, I don't know where the exact line should be drawn. Maybe some of the experts are wrong, and maybe some of them are correct when it comes to that. I don't know. But I know even in the most liberal states, there still is that line of, hey, once you reach that third trimester, your options are going to be limited because we have research to show that consciousness and a nervous system starts to form. They start to have feelings. They start to develop, into a person. But again, as far as where that fine line is, I don't know. I know for a fact, though, that this outright ban that we have going is not going to help anything, and it's the wrong decision.
So if someone who stands over here that we unfortunately don't have were to say to you, well, we know that from the moment of very shortly after the moment of conception, when sperm meets the egg and starts dividing, there's a complete unique set of DNA that unborn, developing human all the information is present to develop all the things that's happening, and in about 9 months it'll be born. Nothing really changes as far as the DNA instructions go, not substantially. And then so we know, so they're saying the cutoff line, wherever, they would just argue all those other possibilities are all arbitrary assertions about a heartbeat or this or that. We know a new human has started. We know it's not a platypus or a mouse. Mm-hmm. It's a human being, and instructions for its DNA, its fingerprints are there, which we know scientifically. And they would simply say, let's make that the cutoff, since there's no other line that seems to be non-arbitrary. There's a heartbeat. Well, why the heartbeat? Thinking. Well, why is thinking your choice? What about people that don't think very much at all? Very severely mentally retarded or are mentally disabled, or people in a coma. They may in fact come out of a coma. Right? There's a number of examples they could give like that. The question is simply, why not the beginning of a new human distinct organism? We're a very scientific people, and we know that from science. That's when they start. What would prevent you from saying, okay, well, that's a good point.
It's like when you're baking a cake, though, right? I mean, if you've got the batter in the bowl, you wouldn't call that a cake, right? I would assume not.
Well, so if I may.
That's not it, though, is it?
Well, you're familiar with Bill Burr?
Yeah.
I hate to reference Bill Burr. Yeah. Well, I don't hate to reference him. He's got his joke that he made at the Red Rocks. He's very, whatever. I'm not suggesting watching it necessarily, but he used that exact thing, and he says, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but it seems to me like it's a human being. If I make a cake and I pour the batter in the thing and I put it in the oven, and you come along and you rip it out of the oven, you throw it across the room, and you're like, what are you doing? You ruined my birthday cake. And they respond, no, I didn't. That wasn't a cake. Like, well, it wasn't yet, but it was gonna be in 50 minutes if you wouldn't have done that, you cake murdering guy, He's like, obviously everybody knows if you want to play with words in that moment, everybody knows, well, if it's not a cake, it's obviously on its way to being a cake. Everything is there. And you ruined my cake is a legitimate complaint. No, the guy that everyone laughs at Red Rocks. And they laugh because they recognize that little thing is like when someone responds, no, I didn't. It wasn't a cake yet. Everyone in that, kitchen is like, that doesn't qualify. That was his cake. It just wasn't done yet, right? So what do you think of that? So that analogy, interesting. I just watched that recently.
Yeah, well, and you can flip the analogy both ways, right? You used it the way you used it. I used it the way I used it. Maybe not the best analogy, but that's the way I think about it. It's like, you don't, at the end of the day, if we're speaking literally here, you don't have a cake yet. You have the batter, not the cake.
What if let me apply it very briefly, I think. If I were to do that to you, and you actually made a cake for your mom, you spent a bunch of time on it, and I come in and I actually take it and I throw it across the room, and my response to you to try and tell you ought not to be upset with me is, it wasn't a cake yet, Hunter. That wasn't a cake yet. Are you going to be like, oh, you're right? Do you think, just hypothetically, oh, you're right, it wasn't a cake yet, I don't have any complaint, whatever? Or would it be something closer to what Burr's point is, which is everybody knows, in essence, we're talking about a cake here. It's just not quite done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Would you think in other words, would you be justified in your frustration with me?
In my frustration?
Yeah,
probably.
I'm throwing your cake, and my complaint or my retort is, it's not a cake yet. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's just in there for 20 minutes. It's
If
not
we're
cake
taking
yet.
that specific situation literally, as if it really did happen,
Right,
then
right.
I probably would be frustrated. Yeah.
Who's
But
taking
again,
a woman's cake and
Hang on,
throwing
you're
it?
interrupting Hunter. Sam.
yeah.
Oh,
But
sorry,
again,
yeah.
it's an analogy, but at the end of the day, there are two different situations, right? So,
Yes.
you know.
It is an analogy. That's right. It'll break
Right.
down at some point.
right. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's
Free or do I
we're
need to
speaking
take
as
one?
if
Yep.
your statement, right, is it's the same thing as a full human. It should have the same rights as a human.
Right.
What you have at 1 week should be considered the same as all these people out here. And again, that's not registering with me. I don't know why. What scientific evidence do you have that suggests that that's appropriate?
Yeah, well, again, playing the devil's advocate, if
It's
someone
a life. We can agree that there is a life inside of
And
that
would you-
other
May I make a
person, but
comment on
is it a human life? Is the question? Is it a person?
Yeah, if it's not a human life, what would it be? I suppose that's what they would ask.
Well,
So it is.
In those first few weeks, it's a collection of cells. It's not even a fetus yet, really. I mean,
So they would. So you asked for scientific evidence. They would say, again, just to repeat this thing earlier. Well, maybe the biggest scientific evidence is that it has a complete set of DNA that it will have when it's 4 months old in the womb, 4 years out of the womb. That DNA is there. What we know scientifically is, in fact, it's a unique organism,
true.
and it's not a platypus. It's not a mouse. It's a human being.
right.
It's not quite done yet, and if you leave it alone, Lord willing, it's gonna be born in a few months, right? But you're intervening in its natural good life cycle by, taking it out of there. That would be the scientific basis that people, in fact, have given as we've done this. Is if we're going to talk about science, then what we know scientifically, it's a human being. It's not something else.
What you think
it's not cabbage.
I'm a scientist. I teach biology here. So what we think of science and what you think of science is very different than what I think. So continue.
Well,
Keep that in mind. We're both humans.
are you arguing, Sam, that it's something other than a human being?
No, the comment I wanted to make was about the cake analogy, right? And you were getting to it. And I want to maybe say it in a different way, my perspective of that question.
Sure.
It relates to the would you drown a baby or smother a baby?
Right.
Well, I would ask, let's put it to real things, because abstraction is nice and thought process. Let's put it to a real person. I like to do that. So let's say you're a woman and you are baking a cake. In other words, you've gotten pregnant. And it starts with these two cells, and they implant in the side, and then they continue. And you're right, at that moment, you have these two combinations of DNA. From that moment forward, however, you have mutational events. So once that splits, let's say one cell has a mutation, every cell from that second cell of a person, that's most of your body, is affected by that mutation. So you change literally while you're in the womb. You aren't the person you are when you started. If you're saying you're a person by a cell, you aren't. You change. Your DNA is not the same. Your cells and your right now, those cells have different DNA than these cells.
Yeah, the statement wasn't there was no change whatever, because I'm aware of mutational change. The statement was something like no substantial change, such that,
Development?
Yeah, not substantial in the sense that you don't have what started as, let's say, an Asian person, and they end up being Swedish or something.
About somebody ethnically from Asia? Or
no, I'm just saying that
as a white person.
Ethnically, genetically,
sure,
you don't have something that's different than what
let's say.
started in a substantial way. And I don't think exactly what, I suppose the question might be what percentage, if such a thing could be measured. Hold on, I'm in the middle of a sentence. The question could be what, percentage changes. Because if you're including any kind of mutational change, which of course happens, obviously there's a very, very minute, there's changes, no question.
Is your assertion not that it starts out as one thing and it stays as one thing and you are the same from that point of conception to death? Because that's what I heard.
Again, the word substantial is what I use. It's
you
just.
don't think a change in your genetic structure that affects your traits is substantial?
I'm saying that
half of your body, you could be calico, right? Half of your body could be white pigment, but the other half got a mutation in the promoter that controls the gene expression for melatonin or melanin, and so half of your cells, you're blotchy, right, with little black spots, vitiligo, right? That is a genetic basis. Those are two populations of cells, meaning you started off as one. But you are now many DNAs. You are not. And let me give you a specific biological example that relates directly to your question and development. I'll talk about human development and specifically human sexual development. Now, I have a question.
Well, actually,
at birth, are you a male or female? Has that been determined by DNA?
I actually am going to change, if I may.
Because it's a point.
Well, no. Here's the thing. So my
No,
word
don't
says.
tell me well, no.
Well,
You
this is.
stop right now. Don't tell me when. Say you disagree, but you're really dicky. Do you realize that? I've had it.
Well, Sam.
You get interrupted a lot. I understand. But it's called a conversation and it flows. There aren't rules.
Yeah.
This isn't an exam. And I really would not like you to tell me or another student no to their opinion. Say, I'm sorry, I disagree, but you're interrupting me the whole time. I'm trying to actually I'm a biologist. I'm an expert.
So do you believe it's
I don't know
a
everything.
human in the womb?
Let me just say one statement and then I'll walk away and you can follow your rules, okay?
Wow.
Because I think you'll find it interesting.
Yeah, because
I think maybe other people listening.
You are, yeah.
I learned this stuff. I learned this stuff recently. So I see signs up, right? There's 4 weeks or so, 20 days, you have a heartbeat.
Right.
And that's curious to me because that's a metric to say this is a human. Now, I would challenge you at 4 weeks to pick out of a lineup a human fetus, but, that's neither here nor there. So now back to your thing of development. I think the assertion is, in philosophically, that a person is a person. There's a soul. There's something connected. It's more than just a cell that's fertilized. It's a thing, right? I think I'm trying to get at what maybe your conception conception of conception is.
Well, I haven't said that, but go on.
You haven't. I'm just trying to learn.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm just going to talk. So you go, now you develop, right? 4 weeks you got a heart, and people are like, oh, that's a human. So my question is, let's just take sex for an example. Biological male, female. When was that decided in development? And when can it be changed in development? Because if it can be changed, and it does change, before 6 weeks of development, you have what's called a bipotential gonad. Anything that happens before 6 weeks can change the entire trajectory. If you're XY, it doesn't matter. That's not how genes function. Genes functions on base to protein level. And if you change, if there's some hormone, let's say your mother, this happens in cattle. You get two twins. They're one's male, one's female. The male, their hormones affect the female, and they make a female. They're called a free martin. I've learned this. And they test with a pen. They stick it in the vaginal canal, and if it stops, so this happens all the time with twin cattle. So what I'm saying is, let's say there's a hormone that your mom has, not even you, but during that 6 weeks, and that affects you, changes you from what should have been a male, and now you are a female or have female characteristics. Now, what does that tell you about the solidity of it being a person all the way through? If you haven't even decided what gender and sex you are, God hasn't decided it until 6 weeks. We don't know.
Right.
There's no medical way you can tell to predict what will be prior to 6 weeks. Do you hear that?
I hear that. I think the response, I don't think that's quite in what in fact, the people who would be on strongly disagree with you, Sam, would be agreeing with your comments about it has a heartbeat. That actually has always been,
right?
Well, after 6 or so weeks, there is in 4 weeks. Well, okay. All right. Well, there you go. Well, you're a biologist. After 4 weeks.
This is life, though.
Well, hold on.
The 4 weeks is a propaganda tool that's probably in this book called talking point.
Well, do you believe is it 4 or is it 6 or what would you say?
I don't know what it is, but I think it's probably 4.
You think it's
think
probably
you're right.
4? I thought you said,
I don't
is that
think
propaganda?
The conclusion is the same.
Is it
no?
propaganda
I think
or is
you're
it true?
using a statement, a fact,
Yeah.
to as evidence for a point, but you're ignoring other
Well,
evidences.
at the moment, I'm actually asking as
Not
you
you,
as
I
a
mean-
biologist what you believe the start is. That's
Right,
actually what I'm
that's
asking.
what
When does the
Start
heart start beating? At what many weeks?
I think in humans it's about 4 weeks. I think that's
Okay.
a pretty good number.
Okay. Well, so the
Not
point is
functional
the
mature heart, but you
the
can see something moving.
Okay,
A
so-
chicken, 2 days. That's how important the circulatory. That's why it's so early in our development. Because once you get above a certain size,
Yeah.
you need movement of fluid to move nutrients, and if you don't, it dies.
Okay, so Sam,
Yeah,
the
that's
people that actually
Yes.
would agree with you that that's not a good reason
Okay.
to call it human
They
are
disagree
actually
with
been
you.
all the pro-life people
Sure.
that are standing. It's a different question, but they're
Yeah.
usually over
Yeah.
here, but they'd be over there right now,
About-
and they would say, no, we don't think a heart beating is a good marker for
What's a good marker?
defending a human being. They would say it's when it's a human being. And when I use the word substantial, all I'm meaning is something like what is happening is not changing into a platypus. It's a human being. And there may be significant in some aspects, mutational changes, but it's still human being. The DNA is all there from the beginning. And that's coming back to Hunter's question earlier, which was, what's the scientific basis? That's been a statement. And Hunter, I'm curious for your answer. What your thoughts? So they would say it's not a religious, philosophical thing. It's a scientific understanding of the beginning of human life. Mutations notwithstanding, changes, but that person has begun. That human.
You're asking me when the person begins?
Well, no. I guess I'm asking you, what would you say to them? Because you had said, I can't remember exactly what you asked, but what would be the scientific basis for saying it's a? I don't remember your question exactly. Is it okay if your question is, what would be the scientific basis for someone who would be in strongly disagree? They would say, well, the only non-arbitrary one, as opposed as to agree with Sam's point about the heart beating, feels like an arbitrary trend. Why the heart beating? Why this? Why that? Well, we know when a human starts, and we know it's a human. I think, Sam, you agreed as a biologist, it's a human being. It's platypus is always my go-to.
No.
Sorta. Okay, well.
I mean, we used to be connected to a platypus. We are connected to
So what would you say to them?
Crazy.
Well, I don't. Again,
It's DNA. We share DNA with the platypus.
So I am trying to talk to
Keep-
Hunter
yeah,
now.
keep going.
so
I'm just joking. It's the joke.
yeah. So again, I don't know what standard you would apply to it. I don't really agree that that's the only non-arbitrary line that's out there. I couldn't. If you're going to ask me to cite it, again, I don't know. I'm not a physician, but I'm sure if you were to ask people who actually perform abortions and people who've actually spent their entire adult lives doing research on this topic, you would probably find that there's more than one line. And like I said, a lot of states.
Want to answer at this faculty.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of
There's
states,
people they disagree with.
a lot of liberal-leaning states even draw the line at viability, and then after that, you can't have an abortion, right? And that's where a lot of quote-unquote blue states will draw the line, like California and Hawaii. They say viability is the standard. If you go past that, now we're breaking the law. But anything before viability is okay. I'm not saying whether.
but on a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
We'll consider. Well, a lot. Yeah.
Sure, and I don't know if that's the answer or not, because again, I am not a physician, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, but I'm sure if you looked into it long enough, there are different ways to answer that question. But as far as saying, hey, like two people just had intercourse and now there's a third person in the room, that's a little far-fetched to me, to be honest. It really
I hope
is.
They're not watching.
So very specific.
It's far-fetched. It's very far-fetched for me. I don't grasp that concept at all. Maybe you have a better reason behind it. I don't see it.
I think they would say, I would say too, but I have heard several students say, again, it just comes back, if I can just come back to that for a moment, they would simply say, it seems as though the beginning of human life is the only, they would argue, only non-arbitrary one, because if you pick some other thing, you can find exceptions, or even viability, as you're not saying that's yours, but viability has changed, for instance, over the decades. It used to be a fair bit older that we would consider viable. With improved technology, viability is considerably, don't quote me on this, except it'll be on video, but whatever. It's at least 26 weeks, if not 24, 23. It's incredible what babies can live. They're born, They're very, very small. They're not fully developed yet, but they live, and you can look up and, you can find videos of toddlers now, and significantly older than toddlers, that are doing really, really well, just fine. You wouldn't know from Adam that they were born at, 26 weeks old. So that standard has lowered and lowered. So, for instance, let's just say, it seems plausible to me, if you agree with it, that continues to lower in 10 years from now, let's just say. 18 weeks. There's some crazy technology, artificial womb situations that we put the baby into from the mother's womb that just seems plausible to me. I don't know, right? But just for the sake of the argument, they're now viable, and so the laws keep changing and changing. And so the point is, the person who would be on strongly disagree would say, that's one reason why I think that's arbitrary. You're just picking a thing that actually itself changes, which is almost the definition of arbitrary, or at least it's close, seems to me. It just changes every year. It's younger and younger and younger. So why not pick when it's a human? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Some of the gals earlier saying it could have a hard life. All those things could be true, but we know it's a human, and we want to take care of the health of humans. The mother, we want to prioritize, and the baby inside her. What would you say to them?
Could the viability standard change in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years when I'm an old man? Probably, maybe. I don't know. I think the best thing to do, though, in the meantime, when it comes to any issue, whether it comes to abortion, global warming, whatever crisis we're involved in, is to go ask the scientists, ask the doctors, ask the people who have researched this their entire lives and have dedicated their lives to this specific question, and ask them what they think. Not the church, not some random soccer mom on Facebook. Let's ask the doctors and the scientists what they currently believe about it, because their opinion is more valuable. I mean, I'm gonna be pretty forward.
With regard to what specifically here?
Well, with the specific topic, if we're going to ask, a gynecologist who's been a doctor for 30 years and who has done this procedure before, or if you ask a scientist who, is a biologist and who's been studying this for 20 plus years, those two opinions are more valuable than someone from the church or some random person on Facebook.
Yeah.
We need to ask them what they think about the issue and where the line should be drawn. And if it evolves, then maybe it evolves. I can't tell you whether it will or won't. I can't predict the future, and neither can you. But I think in the meantime, when it comes to things like this, we need to ask who the true experts are. No offense, but we need to ask. Yeah, everybody can have an opinion, but at the end of the day, we got to go straight to the experts, the people who've been studying this their whole lives, people who actually know, or at least they are pretty confident they know the answers to these questions that you're asking.
I agree with a lot of that, actually. Right. I do think people who understand embryology, for instance, ought to be looked to for. Obviously, embryologists might disagree themselves, so there is a tricky thing. Depends who you ask, what expert you ask. That's, of course, a thing. But that aside, I do agree with a lot of that. Like, I would rather believe an embryologist's knowledge. At least I would start off more likely to believe them than Joe Schmo, who, watches YouTube 10 hours a day.
Let's say, God forbid, you had problems with your heart, right?
Yeah. Who would you go to?
Yeah, you're going to a cardiologist, right?
Yeah, right.
You're not going to go to a psychiatrist. You're not going to go to a nurse. You're not going to go to a Facebook mom who claims she has the cure for your issue, right? You're going to go to a cardiologist, right?
Yeah, sure. Most Westerners would, at least.
Yeah. So, when we're having this debate and when we're making government policy around it, it becomes even more important to go to the experts.
So, two things, and then we should probably wrap up. Sure. I would just say, I agree with that in sentiment. I definitely do, in a lot of ways. I would qualify some things, but I would say one thing: the embryologists do. It's basically a universal understanding. Somebody will find some random guy, but that they know when human life begins. Like, back to the scientific question, they know when it begins. It's human life. It's not a duck. It's human life starts at shortly after, right at conception, essentially, and then and you can respond to that. But I mean, that would be more or less like, if I would agree with you, let's do that. In fact, Dr. Lily King, quotes some of them in that little book, and I would encourage you to read it. But here's another expert. There's a pastor I like, an author that years and years ago, probably a couple decades ago, I got lunch with an abortionist. He wanted to hear from an abortionist himself, what are you doing? And he prepared this whole thing. He studied to prove to him that it's human life. He came ready, documents, whatever. And he sat down and he started to do that, and the abortionist, essentially said, he just sort of cut him off, said, what? No, I know it's a human. I know it's a baby. He may not use the word baby. I think he did. I'd have to check. But I know it's a human life. I know that I'm ending the life of a human child. And the pastor was dumbfounded, because his whole preparation was to convince him of this. And this expert, who had done, I believe, thousands of abortions, who knew what he was doing, says, it's a human child. It's a baby. And then the conversation was different. He's like, well, then, to essentially, why are you why do you do it then?
Right. Well, and to be fair, that's one person, though.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a collection of experts, not just asking one or two people's opinion on it.
Sure, fair enough.
There are plenty of climatologists who believe that global warming isn't real. There are plenty of cardiologists who believe that a high-fat diet doesn't cause issues.
Yeah.
Right? But the collective says, hey, we actually need to go in this direction, and we need to ask the collective, not just
so
two individuals.
I do also agree in principle. That's important. You can always find someone that's saying something different, almost always, right?
Right.
Would you agree with the statement then, what we ought to do, and I think what we're able to do, essentially as, more or less educated adults, is make a decision for ourselves based on the best available evidence, and perhaps that answer lies in the minority, perhaps it doesn't, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many say a thing, it matters what's true, and that we want to do our best to determine, and then we want to believe what's true about the fact. Whether or not there's a whole group of people over there saying this or that, we try and do our best to listen from both sides, and essentially I'm saying we have to make up our own minds. Otherwise we're just saying, I just like that camp over there. Whatever they say, they have something of a consensus, I'll just adopt that unthinkingly. It sounds to me like you certainly would not want to do the unthinking part.
No.
My point is to say, I agree, and then it does come down to, as you say, we have to form an opinion based on our best available evidence. And of course, people are going to argue, I find persuasively, since we're just you and I.
Sure. And I don't feel like that's what we did, though, at least in South Dakota and in the Supreme Court, right? I mean, we had, at the end of the day, right, most people in government and most people who made that decision on the Supreme Court, they, you ask the doctors, you ask the embryologists, the biologists, it's pretty universal disagreement between them and the Supreme Court and the governor of what constitutes a human life. So I think we need to...
Well, if I may, I do think...
at that.
Sure. I do think that actually is a different question, the constitutional legal question.
Right.
What they did there was not argue about what is human life per se, but what is allowable or not under the Constitution.
We got to figure that out, though, because if we're going to make policy around it, you got to ask the experts, and you got to come up with an answer, because that's pretty important.
I agree.
If you're going to create legislation where women and certain underage individuals who have been violated are going to get arrested and investigated by detectives, you need to have a clear definition, and you need to go to the experts who actually know the answer to these questions before making policy based on, some religious beliefs. Because it is a religious belief at the end of the day that human life immediately starts at conception. That is based on religion. You asked a biologist, you asked an embryologist, most of them are going to disagree. Most of them. I'd be willing to bet my life on it, actually.
Well, I would encourage you not to bet your life on it.
Well, I'd be willing to bet my life on it that most would probably disagree with that sentiment.
That the statement "human life begins at a person." Well, that is a different discussion.
Yeah,
a person,
and that's kind of what the church, and not necessarily you, but the church in general. That's what they insinuate. I'm not saying it's not human DNA. I'm in agreement that there's human DNA in there. I'm just saying it's not what's in there the first few weeks is not equivalent to a person.
Well, that is
that's a different conversation.
It is very quite different, extremely related.
Right,
no question.
Right.
But it is very different.
My bottom point is, we need to again ask the doctors and ask the scientists who have been studying this specific topic their entire lives. We need to ask them what they think, not a politician, not a Supreme Court judge, not someone from the church. We need to start asking these people what they think. And whatever their opinion is, I mean, you have the freedom to think for yourself, right? There are people that believe all kinds of things on this campus, but when it comes to policy decisions and decisions regarding healthcare, we need to focus on these people's opinions, because whether you like it or not, there are certain people's opinions when it comes to certain topics are more valid than others. That might sound condescending. I don't mean it to be, but that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. You have to humble yourself and be like, okay, if I'm talking to a lawyer, right? I mean, I don't know anything about really traffic laws or what constitutes a felony or a misdemeanor, but an attorney who went to school for 10 years knows that.
Yeah.
And I don't.
Funny enough, Hunter, I couldn't agree more. It does sound condescending and arrogant to, I would say, probably 99% of your generation. And probably mine, maybe less, but the idea of this statement, you specifically said, some people's opinions are more valid than others. Yeah. Most people, if you say to that, they're going to consider you arrogant, condescending. I actually, at least in the basic principle of the thing, I actually agree, especially with the examples you're giving, is a lawyer's opinion about a legal matter more valid than mine?
That statement that I made is a, what do they call it? It's, I say that to pull people into the conversation. What's that called?
Provocative.
It's like it's a provocative statement.
Grabber, attention grabber.
Right? Yeah. It's but you hear me out, right? I mean, you listen to what that really means.
Yeah.
Now you can say, okay, this isn't really that condescending. That's actually pretty true, right?
You could be arrogant still, but it isn't itself.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that I'm a pretty arrogant person. I'm not afraid to admit that.
I'm not insinuating that. I'm just,
Well, I'm not afraid to admit it. It's fine. If you agreed with it, that's fine. I mean, I tell people that all the time. My own family knows that.
I have no opinion on that right now.
So, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. Is just to.
Yeah. Well, if we can end, I would agree that the question of the beginning of human life, and what a human is, not if we can avoid the person discussion, which we could have another day. I do think we should go to the experts, to the biologists, to the I'm blanking on the word all of a sudden of the study the origin of whatever. I agree with that. I think we should do that, and I would encourage you not to bet your life on the answer of what you think it is. And so the path forward, perhaps very, very narrow focus on that, is let's do that. And then if in fact it's relevant to us to say, if it's human, we want to give it care for its health. And if it's a distinct human, we care for its health, we care for its mother's health, care for its father's health, whatever. And that would be, I hear the resounding case being made from that side of the lines. Say, let's care for all of their health. And they would say, of course, abortion is not health care because you're ending that. If in fact, right, if that's true, you're ending that life. Last word.
Yeah. No, this is actually more of a question, though.
Oh, okay, well.
If we care about the woman's health, the mother's health in that case, are we going to start supporting things like free pre-K education and taxpayer-funded healthcare then? Because that's what's really going to help these people.
Well, that's a whole other topic itself. That's a good question. We'll end with that question. How about that?
Yeah, sure. It's a fair question, though.
That would be a good discussion, too. Okay, Hunter, thank you for a respectful conversation.
Yeah,
all right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.